All right, class. We are going to be talking about today documentation. And in a former life, I can tell you that I was in charge of a QA process, and I thought there was two real very important parts of that. Part one was that you actually did the right things, and then part two was you put down what you did and you recorded it correctly. And what I found is 95% of the time that everybody did the right thing, but the problem is they didn't document it well. And I will tell you right now that it can either make your life really good or really bad. And what you think that you're shortchanging and writing a short report is better. I can tell you right now, it is a double-edged sword. You can write too much. And the trick is to find that sweet spot, that happy balance between it. Okay? So, and we're going to discuss that. And we're going to discuss who reads a report and how you should adapt your style to meet that approach. So let's talk about what the PCR is, your documentation. And by the way, there's some other things I think that's involved in documentation that are important as well. But when we're talking about documentation here, we're talking about the pre-hospital care report. So it is, again, a factual event that occurred during the EMS call or other patient contact. It describes what you found when you got there. Did something change? It describes exactly what you did, when you did it, and what happened after you did it. And it is a permanent, complete written record of that. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a litigious society. Anybody can sue you for any reason, anything. So this guy keeps you out of trouble if done correctly. Now, again, it provides three things. The first thing is the healthcare record. Okay. That's what it does to the other people in pre-hospital settings. It allows us to bill the patient because, again, they take the treatments that you did and then they provide billing. That's where they get their billing from. Okay. Now, one of my favorite things I love to hear it every time is, it's not my job to do billing's job. You're right. It's not. But what it is your job is to give billing enough information so that they can get the money. Guys, if you don't get money, and this is extremely true of if you're in a service that is for profit, when you don't get your reimbursement, your agency doesn't get paid, and therefore eventually you're not going to get paid. All right. Now, well, I work for the fire department. That doesn't happen. Yeah, it does happen. Okay. Because by the way, we get the money back by billing the patient. All right. Emergency medical services is not a free service. It is not a socialized event. All right. We try to obtain funding from every source possible. The more money that we can bring in, the more cool stuff we get, the more new ambulances we get, the more we get better materials. Okay. I can't stress that enough. It is your job to do this. And that was also to provide a legal record. Again, when you get called to court, what are they going to do? They're going to break out the paper. This is what happened. Some of you have already got a taste of the judge already, so there you know. So again, medically-wise, it tells what we did for the patient, including baseline and going forth. And a lot of times we leave the quick sheet there at the hospital, but remember that we are required to leave a full and complete record within 24 hours of drop-off. This is usually done in modern systems via electronic means. Basically, they say, hey, we took a patient to this one, and we literally dump it to the patient's medical record via electronic transfer. Okay? You guys never have to know about it other than you got to get your report in. Okay? Again, your surgical staffs, they need to know about what exactly happened. Guys, that's so very important. Okay? Again, it gives them clues about what to go fix. All right? The floor intensivists, they need it. I've actually had doctors call me from the cardiac care unit going, hey, I need to see your strips. Okay. And so it is very important when they have the events that we document all of that information correctly. Now, a lot of these things, again, mileage is for billing. A lot of these calls over here, this is information that is actually required for us to put in. Guys, when we put in a run report, again, this is the old style. We did it on paper. But a lot of the reports that we now write nowadays go into an electronic chart. From there, it's transferred to the state. From there, it's actually transferred to a national database. If it's one thing that actually we're kind of ahead on compared to other places, we actually have a decent transfer of information from the street level to the state level to the national level. It's actually something, matter of fact, Florida, I will tell you, is actually one of the states where we're way ahead. Matter of fact, a lot of places use our model in order to mimic how they put things in. Okay? Now, there's administrative documentation, so it helps us to gather information. So your response time information, call location, we use all of that data, okay? Where were the hot calls versus the non-emergent calls? Where is it? Matter of fact, that used to be one of my jobs. I would plot where the calls were and determine where I needed to put the ambulances at, okay? Because you always put the ambulances where the patients are, okay? So again, this stuff is where you say, well, I don't need to put that in there. Yeah, you do, because you're right. The one or two that you do, probably not important. But if we're doing 7,000 calls a month, yeah, that's kind of important, and it helps us analyze this. It also tells us how well we're doing, okay? If I'm not using a drug but one time a year, I can go to the doc and say, hey, we're only using, this drug one time a year. Maybe we ought to quit carrying that drug and use something that we are carrying, okay? So these are things that we do actually use to get this. We also use it for research. How well are we doing, okay? It is so very important in order to get this. Now, notice how he's doing the report while they're doing the treatments, okay? And by the way, if you've got enough people in the back of your truck where you can actually do that, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, again, their lawyers, they're going to want theirs. So it allows them to figure out what happened after the fact, okay? And in legal proceedings, it might be the sole source of information. I can't stress that one enough, okay? And just as it can be used for evidence in a criminal case, which is why it needs to be thorough. It needs to be as accurate as possible, okay? And we're going to talk about the things about the law part of it, which is really important. And guys, when I write a report, I write it to where I know that the people in billing have the information they need, and I know that the people in QA have the information they need, and I write it because I want that lawyer to have a full and complete picture of what it is that we did. Excuse me. Now, couple things here. Writing accurate descriptions is so very important, okay? And in the last line here, boy, I can't stress that one enough. Don't put down subjectively the only thing that should be remotely subjective is what you think's wrong with the patient, and even then that needs to be based off of a lot of objective findings, okay? I think that the patient's a drunk. Wrong thing to write. Okay, the patient appeared intoxicated. Appeared to be intoxicated on alcohol. Appeared to have an altered mental status secondary to the use of alcohol. Okay, those things are good, but watch out with your subjective opinions. Writing down the patient's a scumbag, unfortunately, is not going to get you anywhere quick. All right, so again, we all have our different types of things, again, and using the appropriate medical terminology, okay? Now, I'm going to give you a little hint about the billing folks. Billing folks, they hire off the street with very little or no knowledge of what abbreviations or medical terminology means. I think that it's good to write medical terminology because I think that is a standard. And we should be maintaining it. The patient had a cut on the outside of their elbow. Okay, no, that's not an appropriate. But if we're talking about the ventral aspect, 2 centimeters to the left of the of the elbow area, then that's a very good description of where the injury actually occurred. Okay. So I think medical terminology is good. Now, abbreviations and acronyms is where sometimes this falls off the bus. A lot of people like to shorthand, and that's what abbreviations are. And if you have a standardized list of abbreviations, then that is acceptable to use. Okay. DOB is date of birth. Difficulty of breathing. So again, a lot of things can have different based upon their symbol or the words there. Okay. So I'm a big believer in it's probably better to type the word out than it is to use a acronym. And the reason is because if you write the word, you're not going to be in as much trouble. Now, a lot of these slides, guys, have all these different things where you can put this stuff down. And again, if your department approves a list, you need to make sure that you follow that list. Okay? So, medical terminology, I'm not going to delve too much into that other than to say there's going to be some times when, again, we put words together, and I'm actually doing a separate little thing on the medical terminology. But usually, by the way, guys, we have a prefix, a root word, and then the suffix, okay? And that allows us to describe those things. Now, and again, there are complete and total semester courses on terminology. I think that it's very important, and we're going to be learning that along the way. As a matter of fact, we're going to be putting some of those things into our class and different sheets of things that I think that you need to know for your terminology. Okay. Times, again, make sure that it's on there. A lot, guys, that we actually dump in from the CAD systems. So a lot of your electronic reports come actually from the dispatch center. It'll put the times in there for you. But these are the ones that are required by NEMSIS. I can tell you they're all recorded. And it needs to be recorded, by the way, from the same clock, which is why usually dispatch times are the ones that are used. Newsflash. Dispatch isn't always right. They get busy. They didn't mark you. They didn't timestamp you correctly. This could cause a problem. So always make sure that your times are correct. If you have to change them, put in there why you changed these values, okay? Again, communication, it's probably going to be the only thing, especially if you talk to a doctor and you're getting orders from a doctor. I would definitely make sure that I put that doctor's name on your report and ask for their name. And again, ask for their, by the way, first and last name, because if they tell you they're Dr. Smith, and then we get in there and we have 9 Dr. Smiths, yes, it can happen, okay? So, pertinent negatives. A lot of people like to cheat on this one and not put them in there. As you guys have been using SOAP PCR like I've asked you to use, you notice that I'm kind of big on that one. You know, it's great that we found the things that the patient did complain of. How about the things that they didn't, so that we can rule out what it might or might not be? Statements, witness bystanders, quotation marks are good. Their use of profane language, however, is not something I would not use profane language in your report. There's a way to keep it professional. Patient says, I'll be blah, 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 blah. You know, again, then you can put in there, patient used foul language to describe, or inappropriate language, something to that regard. If it is truly, truly, truly bad, again, you would put it into quotation marks. However, you need to minimize that if at all possible. When you're at crime scenes, document safety-related information, obviously. Also, if you think that it's going to be used in a criminal investigation, again, quotation marks are your friend. I remember one case that we had in Palatka where a person stabbed another person. It was a 7-year-old girl that he stabbed, and he was trying to make out like he was crazy. And literally all I did was sit there and in quotations wrote down exactly what he said. Transcribed it word for word, actually scanned it, attached it to my report, gave a copy to the police officers as well, because that way I wanted to make sure that we had documentation of everything that this individual said. Again, Document any of the resources you use in integration, anything that you put in there. It's got to be complete, guys. It's got to be accurate. It really has to be that, okay? Make sure that you put in and fill in all the boxes that you need to fill in, okay? Your narrative core of the document is the core of the documentation. It's much better to put everything, I think, in the narrative. And again, with the electronic chart, there's kind of a variance there. Again, but if you put it in the narrative, also, by the way, if you put it in a check mark box, make sure that the two things match, okay? Spelling, proper abbreviations. Again, a good, well-written report has good spelling to it. If you have bad spelling errors, I guarantee you, as somebody who has checked reports before, I'm going to absolutely go, yep, no, that's poor documentation. You're not sure how to spell it? Look it up. If it pops up red in SOAP PCR when you spell it, look it up. Remember, a couple of letters can change the whole meaning of the word, okay? If you do handwrite it, it needs to be legible. It needs to be neat, okay? And if you've ever seen a handwritten report, I assure you, especially when you're 20 down, it's really hard to keep the neatness in there, okay? Most services you have to have your report done before you go home, okay? Within 24 hours, okay? Make sure that you do that, and make sure that you completely write your report as soon as you get done with a call. As soon as I got done with a call, that was my focus, is to finish my report, okay? If I had to go run another call, I ran another call, okay? But again, as soon as I could, I got back and I wrote the report, okay? And then, now, absences or alterations. Never scribble or black out anything. If you make a mistake, simple cross through with the one line and initial it, okay? Never tried to hide an error, and if you're going to add something to it, make an addendum to your report, okay? Say to the people, hey, I'm adding this to my report. Because if you don't do it, like in this example right here, it makes it like you're trying to hide something. One last thing on this, with the electronic charts, usually once you hit the submit button, if you have to change it, then you open it up. Guys, I assure you, there is a log kept, and it will monitor everything that you change, okay? So make darn sure that if you're amending a report as such, make sure that you put in the reason why that you are doing it. I assure you it's going to make things much easier on you. All right. Again, write your report in a professional manner. Avoid jargon, slang, biased statements, irrelevant opinions. Stay away from those. It's going to mess you up. So write it where you can clearly understand it. If you're not really sure, read it to somebody else, or let somebody else read it and go, is somebody that was involved with the call, and say, hey, is this what happened? Let them do that, okay? The narrative, again, tells what happened during your call. Again, and most of the time we're using a SOAP narrative. In this class, we're using SOAP. Subjective, objective, what exactly happened, okay? So this should be in your subjective. When I teach this, I say we do the objective first, okay? It's got to pass the sense test. Did I see it? Did I hear it? Did I feel it? Did I smell it? If you want to taste it, you're on your own, okay? So make sure that it passes the sense test, All right, patients say that their chest hurt. Subjective. Patient is grabbing their chest. Objective. Patient has a rigidity to the abdomen. Objective. Patient states that the left upper quadrant hurts. Subjective. Okay? Make sure you got the right parts in the report where they're supposed to go. All right? By the way, vital signs, we have to look at those. We have to, so again, it is something that we actually have to take. Now, I remember somebody saying, well, Scott, somebody said that their patient hurts, so that would make it objective. No, it doesn't, okay? If they say it, it's not an objective finding. A vital sign, we take the vital sign, or the machine takes the vital sign, or the machine gets the EKG. That is an objective finding, okay? Again, your head-to-toe exam, and it needs to be thorough. There's a reason why I'm having you guys mark that unremarkable tab. The simple long and the short is it indicates that you did check that area, okay? And hopefully you did do that, okay? So again, make sure that you do a body system approach. When I was handwriting them, I used head, chest, abdomen, extremities. That's what I used. Okay. But can you use any type of thing you can? Of course you can. But the thing is, make sure that it's thorough in your putting it down. Your assessment. What is it that you think is wrong with the patient? What is it that you think? All right. Abdominal pain could be 100 different things. But can we narrow down abdominal pain? Sure. Left lower quadrant, right? It's in the right lower quadrant. There's firmness, rigidity, guarding, rebound tenderness to it. The patient said that it came on, there was a dull pain for 2 days, and then it became extremely sharp. And now she feels like it's burning in that area. I'm thinking appendicitis. Okay? Until proven otherwise. All right? So that's what I'm thinking, and that's what I start my treatment plan based on. All right? So again, this is the SOAP format, the one that we are primarily going to be using. There's also SOAPP, which is plan and procedures. So your plan includes procedures that you have are going to do. Okay. Your chart is another format that you can use. There are some people that kind of like chart. Dr. Frank is not one of them. So again, chief complaint history. If you really stop and look at this, it's kind of what your SOAP format is basically. Okay. I mean, it just kind of breaks the different parts down is what it does. All right. So, and again, some critical patients will actually do a timeline format. I think a code report or something where you did a lot of extensive things, I still do that. But then when I get to the P, that's when I start going down, this is what this is what I did. This is what happened. This is what changed. By the way, reassessments, guys, I usually put in my plan, usually in a timed format to say, especially if it happened at a certain time, I definitely put the changes in there. Okay. Patient refusals. Oh boy. I'm about to get on my soapbox here. The number one thing that you're going to do that's going to get you in trouble is write a refusal. Okay. But Scott, all they had was a stub toe. Okay. It's not the ones that you think that are going to get you that end up getting you. Okay. It's the ones that you think that are simple, then all of a sudden turn into a problem. The patient's going to sign the PCR. Okay. So the patient refuses care even though that they need it. That's against medical advice. And yes, there are a difference between I got there and let's say a traffic crash, there's no injuries, no significant mechanism of injury. Again, do I still probably take vital signs on that patient? Absolutely. Do I still get the information that I need to get? It's not a bad idea. Okay. But if it's a patient that called that has a complaint, you really need to do the full workup on these patients. Now, do they have a right to say, hey, I don't want your help? Of course they do. Document, document, document. What can you document? I can see their respiratory rate from over here. I can tell their level of consciousness from over here. I can determine whether or not they appear to be able to have the ability to refuse treatment by simply talking to them. Okay. And record your reasons for refusing care. Okay. You know what? Hey, I just don't like the way you smell. That's why I'm not going with you. Okay. That's a reason. All right. So document. But again, the one thing that you do have to make sure of is that they are able to refuse care. Okay. So they have to have, in other words, you have to determine whether or not they have the ability. Now, that doesn't mean that they're alert and awake oriented Glasgow Coma score of 15. Well, okay, they've had 5 beers. Well, they're alert and awake and they know what's going on. They're able to answer all your questions. But is that person able to make an informed decision? And that's the measuring stick that you're going to be measured against, okay? The other things that you need to put into a patient refusal is that you've done the assessment, you've recommended care, you've explained the possible consequences, that they understood that, okay? Other ways of accessing care, and also you need to put in there that, hey, we told them if they change their mind to call 911 and we'll come back and get them, okay? And they need to completely understand that they could die because you're leaving them there. Yes, I've seen dumber things happen. Guys, you really do have to do that. You really, really, really do have to do it. All right, patient refusals, again, I will tell you that they're usually 2 to 3 times longer than the standard report, if done correctly. If I get a refusal on my desk and it's only about 4 lines, I usually am going to tear it apart with a fine-tooth comb. So again, these are the ones that get you in trouble. The more documentation here, I think that it definitely saves you. I would include who was there, my friends, people maybe not my friends, but with other agencies. And I would definitely contact, if I thought that they were sick enough, medical direction and say, hey, maybe the doc can talk to this patient and maybe talk them into going. Okay. Sometimes, guys, a second or a third person saying the same thing, they'll actually listen. Okay. It's kind of scary, but they will do that. So make sure that you include, by the way, narratives, make sure you include that. Now, service is not needed. You go to a traffic crash, nobody's hurt, nobody's injured. You discuss that. The ambulance is canceled en route. But remember, we still got to write reports on these. But the good news is these are usually fine. Or we get to a scene and there's no patient. Now, there's one little caveat to this, guys. If you find a patient, you really need to do a refusal on them, okay? You really should. You really should, okay? Especially if it's at any point think that it's going to come back to get you, okay? You really need to do it. Now, an MCI, those are wonderful things that we, at that point, probably aren't doing patient cares, but we've got tags. So getting that tag is so important because the tag is what's actually going to be used as the medical record documentation of this. Okay, so again, document as much as possible, as quickly as possible on a PCR that you can. Again, you can complete the MCI paperwork later. And again, if you've got that little number, that's going to help you connect your treatments with the patient. All right. So your triage tags again are going to have that on there, and it should be affixed to the patient, and it should remain there until they get to the hospital. The hospital will collect them, or at scene will collect them, or wherever their ending disposition is, we collect those. Okay. You don't do your report right, and this is the big one. Can this affect the patient's care later down the stream? Absolutely. Could you be sued because you do improper documentation? Absolutely, you can. Okay. So good documentation now enables good care later. Okay. Not only that for the medical, but the legal consequences, right? It avoids frivolous lawsuits. And by the way, if I'm doing a medical review of a case and I'm reading it, or Mel's doing a case where he's reviewing it and reading it, and he goes, we don't need to touch this paramedic because this guy wrote a really good report and covered all of his bases. If we put this guy on the stand, he's gonna be really good for the other side. Okay. That's definitely what you want to have. Okay. So good documentation discourages the frivolous lawsuits. Okay. And remember, this is a big one. If you didn't document it, you didn't do it. Okay. If you didn't document it, you did not do it. All right. So again, EPCRs, why do we love them? Because it does everything electronically. It allows ease of use. It allows transfer of information very quickly. And it allows us to be able to configure the software. And more importantly, we can get outcomes from that a lot quicker than we did with the paper report. Okay. And so a lot of the times there, again, this is ESO, which does that. So there's some of them that you actually click on it, and then you can put in the body systems that were affected, any injuries that you might have found. There are literally dozens of systems out there for the electronic chart, but I will tell you that they do cost a lot more, and it requires some technical field. And again, by the way, some field crews, you go to change your report system, get ready to hear the groaning, okay? And of course, the computer always goes down right about when you're 15 reports down, okay? So it is sometimes very difficult. I know I've taken about 30 minutes here, and I apologize, guys, but the documentation is so very important, okay? You're going to do it on every call, okay? On your clinicals, you're going to do it on every patient assessment, okay? Build your habits now where you're doing good charting. I assure you that it will pay dividends. Guys, in all the years that I did EMS, I probably only had to go to court for frivolous lawsuits Out of 30 years, maybe 10 times. Okay. And if you're a bad report writer, I assure you, you're going to be in there a lot more often. Okay. A lot of times, by the way, the attorneys would actually, when they would go to do a case, they would stipulate to what was in the report and keep going. Okay. If you've got a good report, that's usually what they end up doing. Okay. So understand that. Be transparent. Never ever falsify the report. Never never falsify it. Okay. And again, everything again remains confidential. It is the patient's right. It is the law. And put down what exactly happened. Okay. It's so very important to do that. Okay. Because if you do poor entry of data or a bad narrative, it'll be the one call that you're going to get called to court on, I assure you. Okay. Remember, keep it professional and no jargon, and keep your acronyms and medical terms again to a minimum if possible. All right. Again, the SOAP format's what we're going to be using. All right. So with that being said, that's going to be it for this. I know, again, it's a 30-minute one. I know it's a little bit long, but again, very important. Your documentation. We're going to practice it every patient. Okay. So get used to it. Let's get used to it, and let's develop that good skill. Okay. One of the things that we're horrible as EMS providers is telling people how good we really are. And that documentation, I think, is a big step towards that. All right. Take care. I will see you guys on the next one.